So I was at the bookstore yesterday going down the biography section, and I couldn't help but notice two books. The one on Steve Jobs and the one on the lives of John Lennon. I wonder why they'd say the lives. And well, I started thinking about what I do and how a lot of these people who supposedly are no longer with us are still with us. And they just happen to give us clues all over the place, like having the exact same little nose frame here for Steve Jobs and John Lennon. And would you imagine that? Their face fits perfectly symmetrically, one side to the other and the other to the other. And well, Stevie Boy gives the signs of being part of the club here with his nice little Freemason hand symbol. But it's not just that. He was on the cover of Time magazine, and well, they just happened to have his little devil horns coming out his head. But do you know how much the first ever Apple computer was sold for? That's right, the first ever one of these sold by Steve Jobs, who I'm saying just happens to have some symmetrical proportions to John Lennon. Well, I bet you had never guessed that Steve Jobs' first Apple computer was sold for an amazing $666.66. Wow, what an amazing number. And remember, I said Steve Jobs, who happens to have very similar, in fact, exact proportions, even down to their little nose glass bridge. Just what a coincidence. What a coincidence, especially when we go to this next spot. This next spot where they tell us. They always tell us because they like to mock us, and well, it's part of not impacting our free will. If they just toss us up a softball, or an apple in this case, well then they say, we told you and you just are too dumb to figure it out. You're just too dumb to figure it out. And look at that. They even have their favorite little number there. 33 and a third. Side 3. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious that they're telling us something. The Beatles with an apple and Steve Jobs with his apple. Steve and John and Steve. And there's John again with his trusty little apple. And while we did Bearded Steve and Bearded John, I wonder what would happen if we tried something else, like Unbearded Steve Jobs and Unbearded John Lennon. I wonder if they would fit perfectly. Undoubtedly perfectly. But you know what I got coming now? Because while you probably think this whole thing is ridiculous, and no one that is ever considered to be deceased early is ever just really changing roles to someone else, well, I know different. And if you've seen enough of my videos, well, you know different. And, well, these look the same as those, and that looks the same as that, and there's even that one there and that one there. And why don't we see who they belong to? Oh, look at there. John Lennon. And Mr. Apple, Steve Jobs. But of course, it's all for entertainment purposes, I know. They're definitely not the same people. Definitely not. Entertainment only.